Welcome everybody to this week's Parshat Mishpatim. Lots and lots of laws. The giveaway is sort of in the name. All sorts of different things. You know, we talk, for example, about how you can't have witchcraft or divination. For those of you who aren't familiar, I should probably explain. Divination is in ancient, much more primitive cultures. People would try and predict the future, and so they would go to, a very secluded area, and there would be like a special person who would like tell you the future based on these very strange extraneous means, like shadows or like, the movement of animals or things like that. So anyway, obviously society has progressed significantly since then, but
not so sure.
So anyway, happy Groundhog's Day, everybody.
Are we having an early spring?
But all right, let's get to work. Today we will be talking about a concept that gets discussed a lot in different Torah and lectures. It appears in the liturgy in a lot of areas. It appears in our Shabbat Zemirot, right? This concept of Na'aseh v'Nishma. So, can anybody here just give us like a quick recap? What is Na'aseh v'Nishma? When does it appear? What's the deal?
At Mount Sinai, God says to them, Ten Commandments, etc., and they say, Na'aseh v'Nishma, we will do and we will say. Rather than say, I'll be here. And rather than say, we will hear and do, which is the...
Okay, right, beautiful. So, the Jews say, Na'aseh v'Nishma, we will do it and we will hear it, right, at Sinai, by the Ten Commandments. And so the obvious question is, like, what does that mean? How can you do it before you hear it? So, has anybody here heard of any good explanations? What does that mean? We will do it and then we will hear it?
It means they have full faith in and full submission to God. They don't even have to hear it. They're just going to do whatever.
Beautiful. Absolute faith in God. It doesn't matter what comes next. We're going to do it. And then we can have the details about hearing it, which is almost extraneous. Of course we're going to do what God says. It's a moment of perfect faith. Beautiful. Anybody got any problems with it?
They don't do it.
Okay. I mean, that's lots of us have very beautiful moments, and then it doesn't necessarily always work out. Okay. But okay, first of all, let's put it this way.
How do you know what to do?
Okay, how do you know what to do? I mean, you've got to eventually hear it. That's true. But is it necessarily the case, right? If a person says, "Do it first and then hear what it is it necessarily a sign of perfect faith? What else could it be?
Well, I think I have a slightly variant understanding of it. Now,
Okay.
we will do what we've already heard and what we already know about, and we will listen for more, and we will do that too.
Okay, possibly. We will get back to that idea. But what else might it be, right? If you say, okay, do it first and then we'll listen to what it is afterwards, is it necessarily faith? It could be something else.
I think it could be we will do it and then we will understand it.
Oh, okay. So another explanation, right? It might be first we'll do it and then we'll come to understand, like on a sort of a deeper level. We'll come to learn about it. We'll understand the significance.
You only understand something after you've done it.
Okay. Right? There's a certain experiential factor and you can't, right? It's like people who give parenting advice who don't have children, people sometimes tend to poo-poo them, right? Because they're like, you don't have the experience. But in theory, yeah, theory this, theory that. Okay, possibly.
In medical school, they say, see it, do it, then you teach it.
Okay.
Well, it's the adult way of learning, actually. You do it, and then you sort of...
Learn by doing. Okay, certainly is possible. The problem is, right, if you want to say something along the lines of, right, it's this perfect faith, which is certainly a very common explanation, right? There's lots of other times where a person might say that, and it's not necessarily so complimentary, right? For example, right, you're busy on the phone, you're in the meeting, 10 different things are going on, and a kid walks in and goes, yeah, I want to do that, and you're just like, whatever, just do it, we'll figure it out later, right? Why are you doing that? Why might a parent do that? They might come to regret it later. But is the parent showing complete and perfect faith and confidence in the child, or is it just, whatever, leave me alone, it's not so important, right? The equivalent of whatever, do it, we'll figure it out later, can be very dismissive. It isn't necessarily the show of devotion and faith. Alternatively, right, another example of Na'aseh v'Nishma, how many people here have ever been on a website which has had you must click I agree to the terms and conditions before you can access the website. Right? How many of you have read the terms and conditions before you clicked I agree?
Every
Right?
time.
Right? So what's going on is, and I can also, obviously the terms and conditions for websites are, fairly minor issue. I can tell you as an attorney, you would be amazed how many people show up at an attorney's office basically saying, I've got this problem here. Well, there's this contract. Did you read the contract? Well, I didn't read the whole contract before I signed the contract. It was a long contract. So I just signed it. I figured it would be okay. Right? That isn't necessarily a sign of complete faith and devotion. Rather, it's annoying and I'm lazy and I don't want to do it. Right? Now, presumably that's not what's going on. But, right, we have one other major issue going on with Na'aseh v'nishma, which is, of course, it's very beautiful to say the Jews were standing at Mount Sinai, they were about to get the Torah, and they say, Na'aseh v'nishma, right? First we will do what we accept, and then we can go ahead and hear what God has to say, but we want to establish first that we will do it. Right? We completely accept God's supremacy over us and our duty and responsibility to do God's will. But you would say, then why are we having this year this week? We're talking about Parshat Mishpatim, and we got the Torah last week in Parshat Yitro. What's the problem?
You already heard it.
The words Na'aseh v'nishma appear smack dab at the end of Parshat Mishpatim. 5 chapters after we had the preparation to stand before Sinai. Uh-oh. So, let's everybody turn to page 440, chapter 24. Let's try and read what's going on in terms of text and context for Na'aseh v'nishma. We'll try and understand it in context. And then we'll take a step back and try and understand what is going on in terms of what's going on with Na'aseh v'nishma, what our understanding was, and why we may have had a view that is different from the initial reading of the text. So who wants to start us off?
440.
Page 440? Let's try the cheap seats, okay? Maurice, Jim, you guys want to start us off?
Wait a second. With the mezzanine.
The mezzanine, I apologize. Yeah, 440, 24, yes. 440, page, chapter 24.
Okay. To Moses, he said, go up to Hashem, you, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and you shall prostrate yourselves from a distance. And Moses alone shall approach Hashem, but they shall not approach, and the people shall not go up with him. Moses came and told the people all the words of Hashem and all the ordinances, and the entire people responded with one voice as they said, all the words that Hashem has spoken, we will do.
Okay, now, let's just pause for a second there, right? At this point, Moshe goes and tells to Bnei Israel the laws and ordinances. What did Bnei Israel say? Na'aseh, right? They just said Na'aseh. What happens next?
Okay. Moses wrote all the words of Hashem. He arose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. He sent the youths of the children of Israel, and they brought up elevation offerings, and they slaughtered bulls to Hashem as peace offerings to Hashem. Moses took half the blood and placed it in basins, and half the blood he threw upon the altar. He took the book of the covenant and read it in earshot of the people, and they said, everything that Hashem has said, we will do and we will obey.
So they translate Na'aseh v'nishma as we will do and we will obey. Okay, but whatever, the point is, when do we actually have the words Na'aseh v'nishma? Right, Moshe has already gone to the people, he's already explained the laws to the people, they've already agreed to do the laws, and then Moshe writes down the laws, and they have a sacrifice, right, again, when we sort of think of sacrifice as being this, ancient esoteric ritual. Let's translate it into modern parlance. What do we in today's Judaism call sacrifices? We call it?
Prayers.
Sorry?
Prayers.
Not quite. After prayers.
Offerings.
What do we call it today?
Donations.
Kiddush. Hey, Kiddush. Right? What happens? You get together and you have some cholent. Okay. right? You already had your prayers, right? In this case, you have the laws and the agreement and the actual covenant. So they're putting, and then Moshe takes the book of the covenant, whatever that is, we'll put that aside for the moment, and he begins making a covenant with the people. And at this point, right, after Moshe has been told the laws, after Moshe tells the laws to the people, after the people said they would accept the laws, after the laws are written down, after the laws are recited to the people, and the people are making a sacrifices and part of the covenant, at this point the people say, Na'aseh v'nishma. Okay, what happens next?
Moses took the blood and threw it upon the people. And he said, behold the blood of the covenant that Hashem sealed with you concerning all these matters.
Okay, Jim, what comes next?
Moses, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 of the elders of Israel ascended. They saw the God of Israel, and under his feet was the likeness of sapphire brickwork, and it was like the essence of the heaven in purity.
Just for the record, I have absolutely no understanding of what this means. So you can feel free to ask me questions, but the answer will be, I have no idea what this means. So, okay, continuing on.
Against the great men of the children of Israel, he did not stretch out his hand. They gazed at God, yet they ate and drank.
Okay, next.
Hashem said to Moses, ascend to me to the mountain and remain there, and I shall give you the stone tablets, and the teaching and the commandment that I have written, to teach them. Moses stood up with Joshua his servant, and Moses ascended the mountain of God. To the elders he said, wait for us here until we return to you. Behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a grievance should approach them.
Beautiful. Finishing us up. Please pass along.
Moses ascended the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. The glory of Hashem rested upon Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for a 6-day period. He called to Moses on the 7th day from the midst of the cloud. The appearance of the glory of Hashem was like a consuming fire on the mountaintop before the eyes of the children of Israel. Moses arrived in the midst of the cloud and ascended the mountain. And Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights.
Okay, so what happens after the Jews say Na'aseh v'nishma? What we have is the conclusion of the covenant. Then Moshe goes up the mountain, and we have this whole exchange is what's going to happen. And Moshe is going to get the luchot on the mountain, and he's going to get special instruction. And Moshe is there for 40 days and 40 nights. And while he's up there for 40 days and 40 nights, what happens? What does he learn about? What comes next? You don't have to read it inside, but what's the next parsha?
Noise.
Sorry?
He hears noise.
Okay, that's what the Jews are doing. What does Moshe learn about during these 40 days and 40 nights? Right? What comes next? There's a commandment which goes into very, very detail because it's not in... Sorry? Okay, Parsha Truma, right? It's not the laws of Truma from an agricultural standpoint. It's the laws of... building the Mishkan, right? Building the tabernacle. So what happens is Moshe comes down from the mountain, right? We've already had Ma'amad Har Sinai, right? We've already had the revelation at Sinai, the 10 Commandments, I am Lord thy God, etc., etc. Then, after all this, remember, that was back 4 chapters ago. After all this, Moshe has this whole, reading of the laws to the people, because remember, what was the rest of the book of Mishpatim? It's the laws. Moshe reads the laws to the people. The people say, we will do it, right? Na'aseh, we will do it. And then we have this sacrifice, blood type situation going on. Then the people say, Na'aseh v'nishma.
Bless you.
Bless you. And then, right, that's exactly what Moshe says. He blesses the people. And then what happens, right? Moshe goes back up the mountain and he says, okay, Aaron and Hur, you're in charge. I'm going up the mountain. And Moshe's gone for 40 days and 40 nights, presumably to learn about the Mishkan. Now, who remembers learning about Na'aseh v'nishma this way? Exactly, right? But then Na'aseh v'nishma doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. If the whole point is, we will do it and we will listen, we will accept God's laws, and now let us hear God's laws. What do you mean? Moshe just finished reading God's laws, right? The Aseret Dibur happened a while ago. And Moshe just finished reading the book of Mishpatim, and it's not like, okay, we accept it and now read the rest of the laws. There are no more rest of the laws, at least not for another month and a half until Moshe's come back down from the mountain.
But where are you getting your translation from? Because to me, I'm not an expert in biblical Hebrew, but to hear or to listen, just as in English, I will listen means I will obey. Doesn't mean I will hear it.
So you could say that, but then the question is, what's the distinction between Na'aseh v'nishma and just Na'aseh? And that's actually, right, because say, we will do and we will obey, is basically the same thing as saying we will do. Not only that, and actually, I think even a broader question than that, because not just based on how you translate Na'aseh v'nishma, if you translate it that way, it becomes redundant. But in general, right, if you haven't yet heard the laws, right, imagine, right, everybody knows that if you're going to make a biblical analogy, you have to use a king. Because all the biblical analogies use a king. Nowadays, I don't know how well we relate to the idea of a monarchy, but okay, we'll do the best we can, right? The king's crier comes into town, as happens from time to time, right? And they blow the trumpets, da-da-da-da-da, and all the people are gathered, and the crier says, "Behold, an edict from the king." And everybody just goes, "We shall do whatever the king says." Right? What have they done? Right? They have said, "We have agreed to this edict," right? They don't need to say, "Now read the edict," right? It's perfectly fine to say that, but it's almost irrelevant. What's doing all the work in Na'aseh v'nishma? Na'aseh is doing all the work. Because once you say, "We will do it," even if you haven't heard it yet, the fact that, "and now let us hear about it," is irrelevant.
It doesn't seem to be redundant to me.
Okay, why not?
Because you can say we will do, as in we will do all the commandments, and we will listen or we will obey, as in we will obey your will.
I'm not seeing a distinction there between doing your commands and doing your will. Presumably God's will is manifest through the commands.
Well, I'm
All right.
one could be referring to what they heard. Another could be a reference to all future
It could
conduct. But as a matter of language structure, I don't see it as really paradoxical.
be. Okay, it's
Or
possible.
redundant.
It's possible there's some daylight there. Maybe we can draw some distinction between Na'aseh and Nishma so that each are doing some of the work.
So is there some kind of kesher connection then for the Na'aseh? Because a lot of work is going to be done with the Mishkan.
Right,
It's
the Asuli Mikdash, right?
It's the most amount of work, real work, and it's the most involved the people had since building the Ego. So.
Well, people haven't built the Egel yet, but
Yeah.
yes. And it's certainly much, much more difficult and complex to build Mishkan than to build the Egel, for sure.
Yeah.
We just
But
throw
it's
the
the
fire how it
most-
comes.
Exactly.
It's the most, quote, hands-on that people will be doing.
Sure. Right.
So maybe there is that.
In fact, to be technical about it, the people didn't build the Ego, right? Who did build the Aaron did, right? Okay.
But so therefore, with all of the blueprints coming up,
Do we have any reason to believe that Bnei Yisrael suspect that they're about to be ordered to build a Mishkan?
Well, it seems,
They-
there seems some reasonableness that now that we've heard the laws, we should build a temple of some sort in order to help carry them out.
Sure. Oh no, it's perfectly reasonable, but I don't think there's any. You would necessarily, be in a situation where you read out the laws and Moshe is in the middle of this ceremony, and Israel are calling out, "We're ready to build the Mishkan now," right? Maybe, but that takes to be very prescient, I think.
maybe just foreshadowing.
Or it could be foreshadowing. Sure, you certainly have lots of literary devices. Yes, Tamara.
The word nase would just by itself mean we agree.
Russ,
We agree.
I agree.
Just like you mentioned in the computer.
Yes.
We agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
They're clicking yes, yes. Okay, so I think we all see the problem here. So let's try and take a step back to try and understand what's going on a little better. So let's take a step back to chapter 19, right, page 400, to read about the actual preparations for Sinai. And hopefully we can put two and two together. First, what we're going to try and do is understand on a pshat level. And again, I've said this before and I should say this again. pretty much nothing that we're saying today is going to be any of my ideas. A significant portion of what I'm taking is from a couple of different shiurim combined from Rabbi Liebtag. And then what we're going to do after we take the Pshat approach is we're going to try and ask the question of, well, then why is it that we had this other impression? Where does it come from? And there's a very straightforward reason for that, and we're going to try and understand why we had this other idea. Okay, so 400, who are we up to reading? Sam, we up to you? Okay.
19 or?
Yes.
In the third month from the exodus of the children of Israel from Egypt, on this day they arrived at the wilderness of Sinai. They journeyed from Rephidim and arrived at the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness. And the children camped there opposite the mountain. Moses ascended to God, and Hashem called to him from the mountain, saying, "So shall you say to the house of Jacob, relate the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to Egypt, and that I have borne you on the wings of eagles and brought you to me. And now, if you hearken well to me and observe my covenant, you shall be to me the most beloved treasure of all people. For mine is the entire world. You shall be to me a kingdom of ministers and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel." Moses came and summoned the elders of the people and put before them all these words that Hashem had commanded him. The entire people responded together and said, "Everything that Hashem has spoken, we shall do." And Moses brought back the words of the people to Hashem.
Okay, wait, let's pause there for a second, right? Now, what do we have here? All the people say, Na'aseh. Once again, we will do. Interesting, right? Parallel language. In context, though, what does it seem that people are agreeing to do? So are they agreeing to do the Ten Commandments? Is that what they're agreeing to do here?
God's people.
Sorry?
And do all that he says.
Right. In other words, right, what's going on is it seems like they're saying we agree to this covenant that you just laid out, right? Now, by the way, I should point out, it's a side point, but I feel obligated to say it. Whenever you see the word eagles, especially in the Torah, generally in Tanakh, it is almost always the word nisharim. There is very good evidence, as Rabbi Slifkin has pointed out, that nisharim does not mean eagles, which are not particularly notorious for their wingspan, but rather vultures, who have very, very wide and powerful wings. It's probably in modern imagery, not quite as romantic, especially for people who are like big fans of Tolkien. The vultures are coming. That generally has like a less. That usually doesn't imply salvation. If anything, it implies the exact opposite. But still, all right, it is what it is. Nonetheless, right? What do we have? Hashem has told Moshe to tell Bnei Israel, "I'm going to make a covenant with you, and you're going to be, my special people." And Moshe conveys this to the people, and the people say, "Na'aseh, yes, we will do. We agree to this covenant. We will do what it is that God desires." Okay, what happens next? We can pass it along. Pass it on down.
Okay. Moses brought back the words of the people to Hashem. Hashem said to Moses, "Behold, I will come to you in the thickness of the cloud, so that the people will hear as I speak to you, and they will also believe in you forever." Moses related the words of the people to Hashem. Hashem said to Moses, "Go to the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and they shall wash their clothing. Let them be prepared for the third day. For on the third day Hashem shall descend in the sight of the entire people on Mount Sinai. You shall set boundaries for the people round about, saying, Beware of ascending the mountain or touching its edge. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely die. A hand shall not touch it, for he shall surely be stoned or thrown down. Whether animal or person, he shall not live. Upon an extended blast of the shofar, they made us ascend the mountain.
Okay, so now we have the rules and regulations, right? We've got our 3-day preparation. In the past, we've spoken about the thematic significance of the 3 days, right? The 3 days in leaving Egypt, the 3-day journey of Abram, etc., right? 3 days implies a major life-shifting change, right? Nothing is going to be the same after this. Okay, what happens next?
Moses descended from the mountain to the people. He sanctified the people, and they washed their clothing. He said to the people, "Be prepared after a 3-day period. Do not draw near a woman." On the 3rd day, when it was morning, there was thunder and lightning and a heavy cloud on the mountain. And the sound of the shofar was very powerful, and the entire people that was in the camp shuddered. Moses brought the people forth from the camp toward God, and they stood at the bottom of the mountain. All of Mount Sinai was smoking because Hashem had descended upon it in fire. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of the furnace, and the entire mountain shuddered exceedingly. The sound of the shofar grew continually much stronger. Moses would speak, and God would respond to him with a voice.
Okay, right? So we can skip a little bit, right? We now have the preparations. We understand that, the mountain, there's fire and there's smoke, etc. We then actually receive the 10 Commandments in the next chapter. What happens after we receive the 10 Commandments? Page 412, starting on verse 15.
Was it just the 10 Commandments?
Yes, so at this point we received it, right? And as I said before, it's not the 10 mitzvot, it's not the 10 commandments. I'm using the 10 commandments colloquially. 10 dibrot means the 10 utterances, right? These are the 10 things that God said directly to the Jewish people. All right, 10 commandments is a misnomer. We have lots of commandments in Judaism, way more than 10. But okay, right, what happens after the completion of the Aseret HaDibrot?
The entire people saw the thunder and the flames, the sound of the shofar and the smoking mountain. People saw and trembled and stood from afar. They said to Moses, "You speak to us and we shall hear. Let not God speak to us lest we die."
Okay, finish it up. You want to take us home, George?
Moses said to the people, "Do not fear, for in order to elevate you has God come, so that awe of him shall be upon your faces, so that you shall not sin." The people stood from afar, and Moses approached the thick cloud where God was.
Okay, so now we begin our list of commandments, beginning with commandment to build an altar, right? How you build an altar. There's a wrong way and a right way to build an altar. And then you have the Eila Mishpatim, right? These are the Mishpatim, these are the laws, followed by Parshat Mishpatim, right? Listing of all the laws. And then we go back to where we started from, where Moshe comes back and relates and reads the laws to the people. So what's going on? So let's take this step by step. What happens is, Bnei Yisrael approach Mount Sinai. They receive all these rules about how, electrified fence, don't come near it, don't touch it, it'll be really bad if you do. 3 days, preparation, everybody's ready. What happens on the 3rd day? There's the fire and the smoke, and the people are terrified. People are terrified. So what do they say? They say to Moshe, yeah, we don't want to do this anymore, right? We're going to die. This is, our bodies, our souls cannot take this. So, right, you speak with God. What happens? Okay, Moshe goes to speak to God. What does God say to Moshe? God says to Moshe, here are the laws. The Eila HaMishpatim. Right? Starting with how to build an altar, going straight on through all the laws of, murder and this and theft and all the basic civil laws, ritual laws, you name it. Then what happens after all the laws are given to Moshe? Moshe comes down and tells the laws to the people. Beautiful. In other words, to this point, let's pause right here. What is the initial plan? How are Bnei Yisrael supposed to receive the commandments from God? Directly from God. God says the commandments to the people, and the people hear the voice of God, and eternally, right, that is burned into their memory. What do the people say? Do they like this plan? Do they like plan A? No. People do not like plan A. Why? They're going to die, right? It's terrifying, right? It's too scary. Okay, so we go to plan B. What's plan B? Plan B is God speaks to Moshe. Moshe speaks to the people. Beautiful, right? Is anybody scared? Is anybody going to die?
No.
Right? No, right? Moshe has to do all the work here. But, right, Moshe is uniquely qualified to do this work. So what happens? Everything is going swimmingly. Moshe comes down from the mountain, reads out the laws to the people. The people say, Na'aseh, right? We will do it. So Moshe says, great. We'll make a covenant. We'll have a kiddush. Beautiful. What happens in the middle of the covenant? What do the people say? Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do it and we will hear it. What does that mean?
Sounds like they want to change their minds and go back to listening directly.
So it sounds like they're changing their minds. They're saying, we don't like plan B. But what's the problem? Can they go back to plan A?
No.
Plan A doesn't work. Plan B doesn't work. So what do they need? They need a plan C. How could you possibly have a plan C? It doesn't work if God speaks with you directly. That's Har Sinai. That doesn't work. But you don't want to have Moshe as an intermediary. Why don't they want to have Moshe as an intermediary? Well, I see a bad intermediary. Chas v'shalom. It is the best intermediary you could possibly have. But what are Bnei Yisrael saying? Even the best intermediary you could possibly have is still an intermediary. We don't want that. So what do? So what happens? Hashem calls Moshe back up. And Hashem is going to have a conversation with Moshe. Because you know what they say? God answers all prayers, but sometimes the answer is no, right? Right? Bnei Yisrael wanted to speak directly with God, not have Moshe as the intermediary. And what does God say? No, Moshe, you come up the mountain, I'm going to talk to you. 40 days and 40 nights. Except, what is God talking to Moshe about? Build a Mishkan. What is the purpose, the sole purpose and point of the Mishkan? V'asu li mikdash, v'shachanti b'tocham. Build a house for God, kaviyachol. Build a place where God can live, the divine presence can rest among the people. So what's going on? God is giving Moshe plan C. Plan A didn't work because the people couldn't take it directly. Plan B didn't work because there was no connection between the people and God. So what do they want? They want plan C. Plan C is to have the Mikdash, to have the Mishkan amongst the people, and in the inner sanctum, the holiest place, you would have the Aron. And what is so special about the Kodesh HaKodashim where you would have the Aron? What are we told in Parsha Trumah? From that point, God's voice would be heard. God's voice comes out from the Holy of Holies in the Mikdash, in the Mishkan. In other words, we've now established plan C. Beautiful, right? Now we understand what's so amazing about Naaseh v'Nishma and what's so different about Naaseh v'Nishma from everything else. Naaseh, prior to this, when Bnei Yisrael said Naaseh, what were they saying? We will do God's commands. And that's a beautiful thing, and that's a wonderful thing. But what's so special about Naaseh v'Nishma? They're saying it's not enough for us to do the will of God. We demand to have a personal relationship with God. And that is what makes Bnei Yisrael unique. Right? This whole rejection of an intermediary. It is incumbent and necessary upon every single Jew to have a personal relationship directly with God. And it's wonderful to have teachers, and it's wonderful to have rabbis, and it's wonderful to have guides, but at the end of the day, it's not that they go to God on your behalf or in your place. They are supposed to help you along the journey while you interact directly with the divine. That's a major thing. And now we can understand why Chazal made such a huge deal about it. And you have the Gemara in Shabbos that talks about, right, all of the, the jewelry that they received and hundreds of thousands of angels coming down. And we also understand why. What undoes all of this and makes them take off their special jewelry and makes God take the divine presence and move it far away from the presence of the camp? Chet HaEgel. Right? Because what did Bnei Yisrael do at Chet HaEgel? They create an intermediary. The whole point of Chet HaEgel is they want something that will go before them. Right? They want something to be an intermediary between them and God because they no longer have Moshe and they need a substitute Moshe. Right? It's very important to remember. God says to Moshe, come and hang out with me on Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights. What did Bnei Yisrael know? How long is Moshe going to be gone?
40 days.
They have no idea. Nobody tells them it's going to be 40 days and 40 nights.
There's a comment about a few chapters later when they talk about the Egel that the people thought Moses was going to come down now and he didn't.
Right, exactly. So the people certainly expect that Moshe is going to come down, except, right, Moshe is gone.
That was the
He's
30
gone a week.
days.
And he's gone for 2 weeks. And guess what? Moshe went up that mountain. He may have, he may have brought a pen and a pencil, but what didn't he bring with him? He didn't bring food and he didn't bring water. And what's up there on the top of that mountain? We read it, right? An all-consuming fire. So Moshe walks off into the all-consuming fire, and he's gone a week, and he's gone for 2 weeks, and he's gone for 3 weeks. And what's happening? More and more and more people are saying, Moshe gone up. Moshe ain't coming down, right? Until finally it reaches the point where Aaron has a full-fledged rebellion on his hands, right? So we're not going into all the details of Chet HaEgel now, but you can understand why what's going on. Instead of reacting to this crisis by saying, let's have a direct relationship with God, let's call out to God, the people say, we need an intermediary. They're relying on the intermediary. They undo everything they did when they say Naaseh v'nishma. Okay, so hopefully, right, we have a pretty decent grasp of what's going on in terms of the significance of Naaseh v'nishma and the placement of Naaseh v'nishma, which explains the psukim very nicely, but still leaves us with the problem. Because when we started this year, everybody was absolutely convinced that when did Bnei Yisrael say Naaseh v'nishma? Right before Har Sinai. So why did we all think that? Because Rashi, right? This is the way it's commonly taught, according to Rashi, because Rashi is quoting the Mechilta, right? Rashi is quoting the Midrash, very, ancient, well-sourced Israeli Midrash, which says what, right? What does Rashi say quoting the Midrash? The things that happened in chapter 24 all happened before Har Sinai, right? They all happened before the revelation at Har Sinai. So, let's go back to chapter 24 so we can see step by step, according to Rashi, what's going on, right? Going back to page 440, right, says Rashi, again, quoting the Midrash, right, what's going on? All of these things, right, about Hashem saying, Hashem, you have to come up, and saying to Moshe, you have to come up, and the people, don't approach, etc., etc. What is Moshe receiving there? Moshe is receiving the laws of, for 3 days, stay away from the mountain, and don't touch anything, and the animals, etc., the whole bit. Rashi also adds various other laws that he received at this point, okay? And then Moshe needs to write something down and give the people the laws. What's Moshe writing down? What are the laws he's giving them? He's writing down the entire Torah until Parsha Yitro, or until the Aseret Dibra, right? From the beginning of Parsha Bereshit until the Ten Commandments, that's what's being written down. All the laws that Bnei Yisrael have received now, the laws of Mara, the Zayim Mitzvot Bnei Noach, all those sorts of things, those are the laws that are being given to Bnei Yisrael. And then, right, the people say, we will do it. And so you have this mini covenant in advance of Sinai, or in advance of the revelation at Sinai. And then the people call out Naaseh v'nishma. And then, right, says Rashi, then you have the actual Aseret HaDibrot. And what happens, right, in Pasuk 9, when it talks about, or Pasuk 10, when it talks about Nadav and Avihu, and how, they sort of peeked at the God of Israel, and they saw this image. And again, what this image means and what the significance is, I don't know. But this is the sin for which Nadav and Avihu deserve death. But since it's such an auspicious and important time, God says, I'm not going to strike them down now. So we wait until we get to Parshat Shemini, right? We get to the dedication of the Mishkan, and that's sort of when the sentence is carried out. Right?
Rashi here?
Yes, Rashi says all these things. Now, if you will recall, right, last week we had a detailed discussion of Ein Mukdama Mu'uchar BaTorah, right? This concept that the Torah isn't necessarily in chronological order, and we discussed how this is often sort of misunderstood. Right, it doesn't mean that, Yitzchak was born before Avraham. Clearly that can't be the case. You can't understand the Torah that way. But rather, what's going on is this. Everybody agrees that as a general rule, the Torah is pretty much chronological. And everybody agrees there are certain cases where the Torah is not chronological. Right? When it says the brothers sold Yosef to the bands of Ishmaelites, and the band of Ishmaelites goes down to Egypt, and then you have a side story about Yehuda getting married, and having children, and having grandchildren, and then it says, and Yosef was sold down to Egypt. It doesn't mean that in between Yosef being attached to the Ishmaelites and the Ishmaelites reaching Egypt, you have 2 additional generations of Yehuda's family. Clearly, right, we're jumping around a little bit in time, and that's fine. The question is not whether it's always chronological or whether it's completely random. The question is, it's generally chronological and it's sometimes not, but what is the sort of level we need before we can say it's not in order? So those who, like Ramban, adhere to a strict order as a general rule say you need to assume the Torah is chronological unless you have very, very good evidence saying it's not in order. You need a very strong proof to say it's not in order, and if we're forced into a corner, that's what we will say. Others, like Rashi, say, no. All you need is a good moral lesson, right? You need a good moral lesson to understand why certain things are out of place, right? And a classic example of this is the Mishkan, because the laws of the Mishkan are given not once, but twice. And sandwiched in between the laws of the Mishkan being given the first time and the actual building of the Mishkan, right, which is largely a repetition of the laws of the Mishkan, you have Chet HaEgel. So those who say the story is written in order say what happened. You had the laws of building the Mishkan, and then you had Chet HaEgel, and then after all that got settled out, they went and built the Mishkan, and everything's in order. Those who say it's not in order say no. That's not the way it's working. Rather, you have the Mishkan itself, the purpose of the Mishkan, is to respond to the Chet HaEgel. But if it's meant to respond to Chet HaEgel, how could it appear before Chet HaEgel? No, that's out of order, and God is sort of putting in a buffer, because it's very embarrassing and humiliating for the Jewish people that they had this terrible sin at Har Sinai. They literally, just moments ago, right, a month ago, they saw the greatest revelation to mankind that has ever occurred, and a month later they're off worshiping idols, right? Chet HaEgel is not really worshiping idols in that sense, but that's not what's significant for us. This approach says it's embarrassing and humiliating, so God puts in this buffer of telling us the laws of the Mishkan. Okay, so what's going on here? Rashi is saying chapter 24 is out of place. It's out of place. Really, all the things that happened in chapter 24 happened way back in chapter 19. Okay, but you need a reason. So what possible reason could there be for the Torah putting this out of place? Anybody got any ideas, theories? Why might it be important for us to get all these details, for us to get Nasa v'Nishma, sort of a retelling of Sinai here in chapter 24? So there's a couple of approaches, right? Approach suggested by Rabbi Liebtag is what Rashi is suggesting is that there's two different stories of Har Sinai. Why are there two different stories of Har Sinai? Because they underline the two fundamental differences in aspect of the Torah. The first is accepting the Torah from fear, right? Fear of God. So what is the nature of that fear of God? Well, you have the fire, and you have the smoke, and you have the shofar, and you have the voice of God, and you have the mountain trembling, and you have the people trembling, and the people hear the voice of God, and they say, we're going to die, right? We can't take this anymore. And God says this will be forever emblazoned on your memories and in your historical consciousness, right? That is the embodiment of fear of God. And then, of course, right, the Midrashim, right, add on to it, right? You have the Gemara that talks about it, right? Kaf alem har kegigit, right? God picks up the mountain and holds it over their heads and says, either you accept the Torah or else I will drop the mountain on your head and this will be your grave, you know. So this is the embodiment of the fear of God. Except, right, there's a problem with that. First of all, it's not the only approach, obviously. But second of all, if you accept the Torah because there's a mountain over your head, I don't think that would be a legally binding contract, right? I think for most people, right, I don't sit in the position of being a judge. We actually have some in this community, so next time you're at Kiddush, you can feel free to go over and say, Your Honor, I just have a legal hypothetical. If somebody were to approach you and say, I would like this contract to not be enforced, I did sign it, so what basis would there be for non-enforcement? Well, the time I signed it, the other party had one of his goons hold a big pile of rocks over my head and said that if I didn't sign the contract, he would drop the rocks on my head and I would die. Right? I feel reasonably confident that the judge would tell you that would be an extenuating circumstance. That would be a coercion, and it would not be considered a legally binding contract. And indeed, when the Gemara talks about that, that's the very first question it raises. And curiously, but the answer gives everybody know what the answer the Gemara gives is? No, it's fine. At the time of Purim, they accepted it willingly. Now, that's a very curious answer for a bunch of reasons, not the least of which is there's a lot of time between Har Sinai and Purim. Like, a lot of time. So, what was the status of the Torah between them? Also, really? That's the Chap of Purim? Why are we getting into Purim? So maybe in a couple of months come Purim time, we'll talk a little bit about, Kimu v'Kiblu and what the significance of that is. But, as we were saying before, right, it's not the only approach, right? It's not that the only approach to Torah is fear. The other approach, right, the other classic approach, the not necessarily the antithesis so much as the other side of the coin is Yira and Ava, right? Love of God. So what's going on? We had chapter 19 and chapter 20, which focused on the fear and the terror. And so now Rashi says we have chapter 24, right, which focuses on the love, which focuses on the Ava. So, chapter 19 and 20 was followed by Mishpatim, which followed by the laws, because the laws are what binds you together as a society. And at the end of the day, generally, right, you can be a very wild optimist and say what binds us together as a civil society is love of each other, which is a very nice thought. But I think most political scientists would say, what is it that binds us together? Why is it that we're not constantly going around breaking the law? Because we're afraid we're going to get caught. And if we get caught, we're going to get punished. And we don't want to get punished, so we don't break the law. And from a civil society, that's a perfectly acceptable way of running things. It's perfectly fine. The important thing is that people obey the law. It's also important that the laws be fair and reasonable, but okay. But that's not good enough from a religious perspective, right? From a religious perspective, Yira isn't enough. You also need to have Ava, which is why when you have Ahava, right, what do we talk about? We talk about the people coming in and saying Nasa v'nishma, the people coming in and saying we want this covenant, people coming in and saying we want this to be a part of our relationship with God. So rather than being followed by Mishpatim, it gets followed by the Mishkan, right? Because what's the Mishkan? The Mishkan is all about having a relationship with God. Not just keeping the bare bones of civil society together, but actually having and developing and enriching a relationship with the divine. I think it's possible that there could also be an alternative there.
Down, boy, down.
So, I think you could possibly have an alternate explanation, which is, right, we need to have Na'aseh v'nishma here in order to keep the understanding of how Chet HaEgel works. Right? What do I mean by that? Well, what's the problem? If you say that what's going on is the people are at Har Sinai and everything goes swimmingly, and then they get the Mishpatim and everything goes swimmingly, but then they say, no, we want to have a divine intermediary, and then Moshe goes up the mountain and he has the laws of the Mishkan, it all fits together like a perfect puzzle piece. What's the problem? Rashi's whole point is, Rashi's whole approach, again, based on the Midrash, is that's not what happened. That the Mishkan is not what happened immediately after Sinai. What happened immediately after Sinai was Chet HaEgel. And that the entire point of the Mishkan was it was a response to Chet HaEgel, to the point where the Parshanim actually have a whole discussion. Like, you don't see this kind of discussion that often, but as sort of a counterfactual. What would have happened if Bnei Israel had never done Chet HaEgel? Would the Mishkan have been necessary? Would the Mishkan have existed at all? And according to the approach that says it's done as a kapara, it's done as a form of forgiveness for the sin of the golden calf, the answer may very well be no. Right? Which leads to this whole sort of question, does that mean that it was sort of encoded in the DNA and it was necessary in the sort of Miltonian fortunate fall type situation? Okay, fine, right? Very interesting theological, philosophical discussion. But the point is, none of it works and none of it makes sense if the Mishkan is a logical request following what Bnei Israel said after Sinai was over and after receiving the Mishpatim. So I think to a certain degree, Rashi's almost forced into a corner. If you want to say that the Mishkan is a response to Chet HaEgel, you have to say that Nasa v'Nishma occurred prior to the revelation at Sinai. So hopefully, with that in mind, right, we have an understanding both on the Pshat level of what's going on with Nasa v'Nishma, why it's so significant and important on a Pshat level, and also on a Drashic level, why Rashi and the Midrash say it is where it is. And from that perspective, right, what's going on with Nasa v'Nishma are two very different things. But either way, right, either it's sort of the ultimate affirmation of faith, or it's the ultimate affirmation of the underlying Jewish desire to have a direct relationship with God, absent any intermediaries. So of course, right, what are we told at the end of Kitisa, right, after you have, this is just going to be our sort of concluding idea. After you have Chet HaEgel, what happens? So we're told Bnei Israel get all sorts of different punishments. And God says, what's one of the punishments? Or it's, I should say, I assume it's a punishment. You'll see why in a second. God says, I'm going to send an angel before you, and he's going to destroy your enemies. And that's a punishment. And why do I think that's a punishment? Because Bnei Israel hear this, and they cry, and they mourn. I don't know about you, but if I got told tomorrow that God's going to send an angel who's going to walk around in front of me and destroy my enemies, I would be very pleased by this. I would not be mourning and sad at all. I'd be overjoyed. Why are Bnei Israel saddened by this?
Because previously they had been told that God would go before you.
Because previously they had been told that God would go before them. What is this a return to? This is a return to Plan B. Why do I say it's a return to Plan B? Everybody go to page 436. Who are we up to? Alice, up to you?
Oh, we're up to Al.
Yes. I'm sorry, should be yes.
I'm sorry, what?
Page 436, verse 20. What does God say? Remember, this is before Nasa v'Nishma.
Behold, you want to name it. Right?
Yes.
Behold, I send an angel before you to protect you on the way, and to bring you to the place that I have made ready. Beware of him, hearken to his voice, do not rebel against him, for he will not forgive your willful sin, for my name is within him. For if you hearken to his voice and carry out all that I shall speak, then I shall be the enemy of your enemies and persecute your persecutors. For my angel shall go before you and bring you to the Amorite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, I never saw these in English, the Canaanite, the Hivite, and the Jezebite, and I will annihilate them. Do not prostrate yourself to their gods, do not worship them, and do not act according to their practices. Rather you shall tear them apart, and you shall smash their pillars. You shall worship Hashem, your God, and he shall bless your bread and your water, and I shall remove illness from your midst.
And what happens, right? Bnei Israel hear this, and they say, Hashem wants to send an angel in our midst. Is that good enough? No. What happens after Chet HaEgel? God says, I'm sending that angel. The language after Chet HaEgel is almost verbatim, significantly similar to the language we have here. Bnei Israel hear it, and they tear their clothes, and they begin to mourn. Because they realize that their big opportunity to have a direct relationship with God, Plan C, has been lost. And indeed, what happens, and as we read on fast days, right, on typical fast days, Moshe goes up to Hashem, and Moshe, to get the second set of Luchot, and when Moshe goes up to get the second set of Luchot, he asks God two questions. The first question is, show me your paths, and God says, my presence will go before you and show you the way. And then Moshe says, right, show me of your glory. And what does God say? Hide in the crevice of the rock, because you cannot see my face. You can only see from behind. You cannot see the face of God. Very curious and very strange. What happens? Moshe goes down the mountain, and nobody can look at his face. So Moshe has to put on a mask, and he can only uncover his face when he's going before God. What on earth is going on there? So we'll conclude with this piece. What's happening is, Hashem said to Bnei Yisrael, that's it. After Chet HaEgel, you've lost your chance at plan C. You have to go back to plan B. I am going to send my angel. I am going to send my messenger. And my messenger will be in your midst. And he will lead you into the land. Who's God's messenger? Is it Gabriel? It's Moshe. Moshe is going to be the angel. Moshe is the messenger of God. So what happens? Moshe says, it's my job now to lead the people. You need to show me the path. I don't know the way. So what does Hashem say? My countenance will go before you. My countenance will show you the way. And Moshe says, right, if you're not going to lead the way, we're not getting out of here. What's this a direct reference to? Where is there the manifestation of God's presence that leads the way? You have pillar of, great, you have the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. You have the ark of God that goes 3 days ahead of Bnei Yisrael. And what's Moshe's second question? If I'm going to be an angel, if I'm going to be God's messenger, I need to understand the glory of God. And what's God say? God has this very cryptic response. You can't look at my face. You can see me from behind, from the rear, but you cannot see the face of God. What kind of an answer is that? Well, what happens when Moshe comes down the mountain? They can't look at his face. Because Moshe's face shines with the glory of God. And so Moshe has to put on a mask, and he can't see or be seen by the rest of Bnei Israel. The only time he can reveal his true face is when he's before God. That's the price that Moshe has to pay because Bnei Israel sinned at Chet HaEgel. That's why we read it on fast days, because it's such a tragedy. This was supposed to be the moment where Bnei Israel manifested their relationship with God, and instead, because of their sin, they lose that, and Moshe, in essence, loses a piece of his humanity. Moshe becomes angelic. Moshe becomes, in a sense, a product of the divine, in that no one can gaze upon his face because the divine shines forth, but Moshe loses his connection to the rest of humanity as a result of it. So that is the tragedy of Moshe. That's why we read this on fast days. And that also tells us how close we were, right? How close we were to achieving that ultimate goal, which all started with Bnei Yisrael declaring Naseh v'nishma. So with that, we can conclude and we can go off the record for questions.